This is the third and final part of the story of Larisa Smith, daughter of Tim and Sylvia DeWall, and their struggles with Scientology and its influence on their lives. Last week we concluded with Larisa having tried to join the Sea Org, finding it was not at all what it represented itself to be, and finally getting away. However, she was still married, and her husband was still stuck in the Estates Project Force, or EPF, the Sea Org's form of boot camp. What did Larisa do, and how did she deal with this?
I went to stay with Cassie. That's where I lived, with Sean before we joined. And of course, she picked me up. She let me stay. That was my home, pretty much. And I was just so depressed. I missed Sean. I wasn't allowed to talk to him because when you leave the Sea Org, you are in lower conditions, not in good standings, have a freeloader debt, which is...
And what is that?
It's, if you leave, like when you're on staff or a Sea Org member receiving courses or processing or training, it's free to you because you're a staff. But when you leave, you get the invoice before you're able to even step foot on any Scientology land base. So I got a freeloader debt, and it was a whopping like $5,000 just for EPF courses.
Right.
And that's like supposed to be the pre-program to get to the Sea Org. But
Right.
I have a freeloader debt. Or I did. Shit. Anyways, so I stayed with Cassie, but I was so upset because I can't. Some people are like really hardcore in their beliefs, so I'm like a DB now, which is a degraded being. Ron actually has a written policy. They shoved it to me in all my doubt times, where it's a reference. He says something like, if you leave the Sea Org or leave staff, you are now considered a degraded being. I was happy when I left. Getting in that car, it felt like I was going free.
Right.
That's going clear. Like, I felt literally OT. It was so freeing. You know what I mean? Just to feel, to be out of that same square block of people yelling, screaming, different orgs, uniforms, titles, badges, nasty, on the freeway. That was liberating.
So what about her husband? What did she do next?
I was so depressed and missed Sean so much. Cassie was mid-OT3. She's not going to help me really as far as telling me Sean will come out or if she even had data. She never even told me who arranged her to come get me and why at 1 a.m. Pretty coincidental, maybe so I don't say goodbye to my husband. I don't know. But I wound up going back to Florida to stay with my dad and Sylvia to get through that time and to figure myself out. I was like, who am I? A DB with no husband who's trapped in the EPF and he's very unhappy and sick. So I went back to Clearwater, and 2 months later, I get a call, and it's Sean. He was FB'd, fitness boarded out for his study bug. So we're 18-year-olds, or we might have turned 19 because of all the time, but now we're actually married in the actual real world. It doesn't just mean we can live together. So that kind of shook us a little bit, just the weight of that. We're married forever, like we can't be with anyone else. So, but we did live in Florida. He worked for my parents for a bit. We wanted to go back to LA, which we did, about 6 months, maybe, I'm assuming, around there. Didn't last long. We just decided we're gonna break up. Not gonna go through the actual, legality of filing for divorce because we don't know anything about that. We just broke up.
Right. And so Larisa was on her own and found herself back at square zero, only this time with a freeloader debt from Scientology for the EPF courses she had completed. She would not be allowed to do any Scientology services until the bill was paid in full. Larisa's aunt was a Scientologist in Clearwater, and she helped Larisa get a job at a Scientology management consulting company called Management Experts, Inc., or MGE for short. These consulting companies pay royalty fees to a division of Scientology called the World Institute of Scientology Enterprises, or WISE, and in return, These companies promote Hubbard's policies and system of organization, which is in use in all Scientology churches around the world. Wise companies sell a secularized version of this system, which they call the L. Ron Hubbard Management Technology. For consulting companies like MGE, their main clientele are primarily dentists and chiropractors. Working at this company kept Scientology priorities front and center in Larisa's life, because as Larisa describes, working in these companies is just like working in a Scientology church.
So that brought me to get, back in that mindset of I have to pay this freeloader's debt off, because in order to be hired there, I had to have that completely clean, in good standings with the Church of Scientology. It was pretty much ran exactly like an org was ran. Yeah. So my aunt kind of put a good word in for me, helped me by giving me, a shared credit card, and paid my freeloader debt off, which was $5,000, I don't remember. And that was paid off. I was in the clear. I was hired and started off doing reception and expediter work, like running around doing favors for people, getting coffees, routing communications like emails or written, orders to different people in different departments of the company, same way it is in the org. That's expediter work. So I was doing that at first, eventually moved into Division 4, and my job was to schedule dentists and their office managers and whoever else, was going to come from their crew or their team to attend seminars the company would hold, just to help them with their business boom, or I think it was like go into power, which is also like a highest Scientology condition of existence. So I did that for a long time, and I was paying my aunt back to pay the freeloader debt off. And things were going good, but this company was ran, like I said, just like a Scientology org. So there's, ethics conditions. Every week you would have to turn in your production or how well you did for the overall week. So for me, it was how many clients or, dentists, office managers I got scheduled to come to these big seminars they were supposed to do as part of their power program. So if you were down from last week, whatever your target, was to make, you would have to apply from the ethics book by L. Ron Hubbard an ethics condition. So if it's danger or liability or treason, or if you're upstat, meaning it was up, you would do, I don't even know, the good conditions rarely came. Power, affluence, normal, or just normal, which is basically you did a little better, or maybe just to give an example, like of a couple times I was downstat, which wasn't really a big deal. I mean, I just didn't get a hold of the dentist, or they were too busy in their personal lives to, make the commitment that they made with MGE to come down. It was, a lot of them were out of state. So it consisted of getting a plane ticket, and we would usually help booking their hotels. But anyways, sometimes they just didn't want to come, and my stats would just be down. So I would be put in danger, which in danger, you'd have to basically look at what you might be doing wrong in what you're in charge of for your post or position. My job was scheduling. So I'm sitting here trying to think of what I did wrong, and then basically they have you write your overts and withholds up. I could have, called Dr. blah, blah, blah 3 or 4 more times, been a little bit more persistent. But as time went on, I'm more, involved with the company and kind of getting more pressure. This is around the time when I was working for MGE, the basics came out. This re-released all the basics. It was a big push to make sure everybody was on these basic books, their courses, buying them, the sets, there's Congress lectures, re-released, and then the whole, I don't know how many books, like a dozen or more basic entry Scientology books re-released. And so we were having not only just apply these conditions for our job every single week, whether they're good or bad, you're getting pressured to go on course and buying packages, and then even kind of like convincing everyone else to make sure everyone's in line and doing that, and your family members. And it's like not Scientology when you're working here, but it is, behind the curtain or whatever, because you got people really involved with WISE, and this is a WISE company. So they did make me do OW write-ups, and like I was saying, the more I was there, more time, it wasn't okay just to write, up overs and withholds on, I should have called Dr. blah, blah, blah a few more times, or I was late this one time, it was more broader in my whole life, and it actually, I remember getting meter checked on my OWs with an e-meter in a little back cubby office at the company. So it was like an org. There was no difference. So randomly, I guess the company, this is just what I'm assuming happened, that the company was overall in a down, stat. Like all the departments were a little bit down, because I was told by Sabri, which is one of the executives, that I needed to go and get pretty much like, I don't know what she titled it or called it to me, but that everyone in the company needed to get a meter check. Basically like an interrogation to make sure, you don't have any crimes or anything juicy that the company should know about that they don't. So I'm just like, okay, weird, but not a big deal. I don't, okay. So I go into this interrogation process on the e-meter with Sabri, which is not my senior. She's actually an executive of the company. And she's asking me questions like, do you have anything you've done wrong? Is there anything you need to tell me? You have any hidden agendas? Similar, I don't know exactly, but do you have any crimes? Have you stolen from the company? Obviously, I'm like, no, I haven't done any of these. But then she asked me this one question, which was, do you have any intention or plan to leave the group, like MGE? And I didn't really. I mean, I had planned to maybe eventually get back to LA, but there was no plan. I wasn't saving up or wasn't anything, but that thought flickered in my mind. So I'm like, I couldn't get past that question when I said no, because it's a broad question. So finally I'm like, well, the only thing I can think of, the only thought that ran across my mind, because she wasn't going to let the question go. You have to have a floating needle, meaning you're not suppressing any thought, or, you're not lying. So anyways, she obviously read or saw that I was reading, something's on my mind. So I said, the only thing I'm thinking of is that I one day want to go back to LA. There's no plan, but I don't know. And she's like, okay. She's prying a little bit more. I'm assuming my needle's not floating. And so I'm just like, yeah, I just miss it. I have a lot of friends out there. And it's just the environment I want to be in. I'm happy here. I love my job. I'm trying to do the best that I can. I'm part of this group, but what was the question? Why are we doing this again? It's not even a real deal. Anyways, after that, she said, thank you, it's fine, but they let me go because I had other intentions outside of the group. Like, I wasn't fully a part of the team because I just happened to want to go maybe one day, someday in the future. So that was just a big deal. I was in the middle of paying my aunt back for my freeloader debt, which is a lot of money for me. I was like 20 years old or something. And it was a shock. So it actually, in one way, it got me to LA quicker. But it shouldn't have been like that. I didn't do anything wrong to the company. I didn't, because I had some maybe idea of hoping, really, to be back in LA, I was fired. I don't know.
Yep, all it takes for you to be fired in a Scientology-run company is to think the wrong thoughts. Now that she didn't have any pesky job in her way, she was free to get out of Dodge.
So I then started working to go back to LA. And it didn't take long. I think it was 2 or 3 months, maybe 4 max, and I was back in LA, and I moved into an apartment actually on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Los Angeles. Oh my gosh, yes I did. With a friend of mine named Larisa Smith. right there, and I was like, oh, chwee, yucky. And then as far as like who I hung out with and stuff like that, it was the same crowd, and it was kind of like a huge group of like scattered kids from a lot of backgrounds, but there were some stable people that were there for many years, and I guess you call it cliques, but I was pretty much back in the clique of the whole young Scientologist crowd who were just partying every weekend, going to the same bars and doing the same thing. But my roommate, Larisa, was working at another WISE company. And it wasn't right away that I got a job there, but eventually that's what I wound up doing in LA, was I got a job where she was working. It was some vitamin company, Wellness Support Network, that's what they were. They're in Glendale. So I got a job there, and it didn't last long. I was horrible. I was partying with the same crew. Kids that were Scientologists, rancher kids. I mean, there was like 100 kids that were in the group that we would mingle around with. And like in our tight friends were like 30 people, but it extended. So there were a few kids that were way more active than others, like on course. Some were clear or said they were, I don't know. Some were on staff, some were on like at the mission and Los Feliz and stuff like that. But majority of the ones weren't really active at all. Like the kids that I was like, that I called my best friends around the time weren't, but a lot of them were ex-Sea Org members or ex-staff or born in the Sea Org, rancher kids, but not really pursuing it, but still claiming, you know, that they are a Scientologist. So yeah, the more active you were in it, you were more gone. You're busy, you know? So we didn't see them as much. Or they had the ethics presence, and they were they were going to chit on us, right? KRs for whatever, who knows, drinking or, I mean, it wasn't good, but I didn't hang out with those people that were really, really active at that time. Yeah, so I lost that job. I was getting sick, I was partying, drinking, dabbling into drugs. It was not a good time, right? And I was trying to come clean to the friends that wouldn't be cool with like all the drinking and the trying drugs and stuff like that. But there were some people that were, you know, in that group claiming they're a Scientologist and totally okay or whatever with this and doing the same thing. So eventually I got caught up with that, and the girl who was my boss, and I think she co-owned the company with her dad, she's like, that's enough, you're done, you're fired. But with my other friends, you know, I'm coming clean. I've you know, tried this drug this many times, and they actually had me do conditions for them, like liability, like or treason. It was a betrayal after trust, and I did that for like my best friend in the world who lives in LA, who's very much was a Scientologist then. I'm pretty sure she still is. Her name's Chelsea, and her and her boyfriend at the time lived in a house, and I was doing these conditions for them. It was just weird how you do, like I was cleaning out her closet and her shoes and her boyfriend's stuff, and it's like, yeah, you don't do drugs, and we knew that as in a group that you don't do that, and everything we've learned in our upbringing, drugs mess with your mind, but that's common sense. But to be doing kind of like amends work, personal amends, like maid Cinderella stuff for my best friend after I kind of confided in her and got something off that was, it's a shameful thing, but it was the mindset, it's how it went, and that's how it was going to be handled in her universe, was doing this condition cycle, and I did that. And I kept my friends. And during this time, right, I'm kind of like trying to get away from Scientology. I mean, I'm not. I'm still, it's part of the lingo. It's part of my talk. It's part of everyone I hang out with in their life. We all were brought up in this, but we're not active. We're not like in the course rooms, or we're not doing that.
This LA scene was the epitome of the Scientology culture, where you have a group of people who are in and out of Scientology, hardly doing any services, and yet, as Larisa said, talking the talk and trying to walk the walk. She spent a couple of years in LA in this partying and drinking lifestyle, and was also dating men within the Scientology community. which is how she met Ramiro Nateras. His whole family was in the Sea Org, and he had been raised by Sea Org members at a place called the Pack Ranch in Santa Clarita, California. Because the Sea Org did not want Sea Org parents distracted with child rearing, they assigned a few Sea Org members that could be spared to oversee raising the children of Sea Org members in Los Angeles at this location, remote from the main Sea Org base in Los Angeles. Parents were sometimes allowed a few hours a week to see their children, but for the most part, they lead separate lives. It was up to those who were in charge of the Pack Ranch to raise and educate these children, yet none of them had university teaching credentials or were in any way qualified to do what they were doing. As a result, most of these Pack Ranchers turned out in pretty rough shape. As Larisa describes, deciding to go out with Ramiro may have been the worst decision of her life.
We had this really chaotic relationship, hanging out with these Scientology kids, drinking all the time, at the Hollywood parties or whatever, random places. And he had a bit of a drinking problem. And we broke up like 1,000 times. It was one of those on and off, hot, cold relationships. And I wind up getting pregnant. And just, it was a very bad spot. We were broken up. Like, we were like hating each other. We want to go see the chaplain at CC, kind of deal. But it's hard for me to talk about this part. It really is. But basically, I got pregnant, and then that was a big deal because we got together to like talk about it. You know, he wanted me to get an abortion. He was like, I don't want to be with you, or you're a crazy bitch, whatever, you're psycho. And I was like that to him, like, you're psycho. Whatever the bottom line is, we finally had a good enough talk to agree to keep the baby and try to co-parent, and maybe we'll work it out together. But we agreed we're not going to drink. We're done with this game right here, like this drinking all the time, just acting like high school kids, just BS stuff. So we went to a few doctor appointments and checked on the pregnancy. You know, I was drinking and I had done drugs in that same time frame. So the first step was to make sure the baby was healthy, and of course, baby was healthy. And we're all on board. We're getting vegetables. I'm getting my body healthy to have a baby. One night he decides to go party with his friends, even though it was against our agreement to not drink anymore, especially because he reacts in a way, gets really aggressive, and he was hard to be around, and belligerent kind of drunk guy. If it wasn't that, he was super, super emotional drunk, or lovey-dovey, everyone loves him guy, but it was one extreme or the other. But, you know, I needed a night alone, and I'm pregnant. You know, I'm like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months pregnant at this time. Hormones are kicking in. I just need him to go away. And he made an agreement he would only drink a beer or two. And I'm staying with the same friend, my best friend Chelsea at the time, who lived in Los Feliz with her boyfriend Mike King. And I was actually living with another friend who rented out a side apartment kind of deal for their house. And he winds up getting drunk, and he comes back to that apartment he knew I was staying at, and just immediately starts banging on the doors to come in, and crying, not making any sense, asking me why am I doing this to him. And it got escalated. I was asking him to leave. He's drunk, go to sleep, please, try to keep my TRs in. It's funny because my friend Chelsea even came downstairs prior to him coming home to drill me with like how to apply my TRs, with handling Ramiro when he's drunk. Like it was just so weird. And I was trying to just be like basically keep your confronting with him if he's belligerent, drunk, and being an asshole. Just say, it's okay, go to sleep, everything's fine. Don't fight with him, don't react. And I was so terrified of him coming home because he's so hard to deal with. And he has shown little violent, he never had hit me before this or anything, but little violent tempers or just kind of being rough. And I didn't know how to deal with it. So I asked her that night before I gave him permission to go drink. I'm like, what do I do if he comes home, in this situation or in this one? And anyways, that's just a little thing to show how we would navigate through our thoughts and solutions to these kind of problems, or to do drilling with your friend on keeping your TRs, which is fine, but it's just also kind of like gives him permission in a way, because we have to handle that. Whatever. He comes over and he's, of course, screaming, punching things, being crazy, crying, like from anger to grief to yelling and punching walls and stumbling up the stairs. They had a staircase that goes up to the loft apartment thing. And so I tried to do the TRs thing, keeping my TRs in. Granted, it's midnight and I'm tired and don't feel good. He winds up just, after all this yelling and me finally losing my TRs, I am crying now. I'm telling him, just get the hell away from me. Go away now. And things, I don't really know how much detail, but he winds up just pushing me over and kicking me. And the whole argument is he wanted me out of his life. He wanted me to have an abortion, which I was saying I'm not going to. We had a name picked out for this baby. Like, I am growing an affinity for this, and I thought we were in this together, and it was just he just snapped. And so right when I refused, I'm like, no, I'm not going to get an abortion. This is our baby. Like, what? We just saw its heart beating on the monitor. Like, that just threw him off the edge. I mean, that's when he started shoving me or getting really close to me, and I pushed him down, and he was so drunk he stumbled and hit his head. And then he started jumping on me and kicking me over and over again on my stomach. He got on top of me and punched me to try to make me have an abortion, pretty much him killing it. So I'm screaming bloody murder, hoping the cops come or something, hoping the neighbors will hear me. And he had thrown my phone out of my arms before because I was trying to call the cops.
I mean, what I knew of it is she described it. She was hiding under a bed, and this fucker came at her with boots and was kicking her in the stomach, screaming he was going to abort that baby. I mean, that's a twisted individual. I don't care how much beer he had or whatever he was doing that night. That's just sick.
Yeah.
But luckily, Chelsea and Mike, who stayed home, it was a weekend night, right? They stayed home that night in the next house, the main house. They heard me screaming, and Chelsea had been with me earlier to drill me what to do in this situation. So both her and her boyfriend ran up into the apartment and I was screaming, and we were in the back bedroom of the loft because they ran up the stairs. So they're like, what the hell's going on? And Romero jumped up at that point, and he ran towards them, and someone put him in a chokehold. I don't remember. I think it was Chelsea. And he left in drunken rage. And I called the cops. So this is what happened is I called the cops after that. And if there's any kind of call to the cops in a domestic dispute, the state will pursue that person. And that's what happened. The detective really wanted to hear from Chelsea and Mike King because they were the ones who heard me screaming, were in the, at the scene or whatever, and saw him and me after. So, and they were totally fine. They had talked to her at least 2 times when I was still in touch with them. 'Cause even after I left, which was only maybe a week after this thing happened, a week and a half max, they were really in touch with me, making sure I'm okay. How am I doing? How's my pregnancy? And that whatever updates on Romero that they had, he left the scene or whatever, drove off in that rage, drunk.
After the incident, no one could find Romero. So I knew Romero's brother worked at one of the orgs. So I got Romero's brother's phone number. He was in the Sea Org. And I told him, I said, you find him or I'll find him. I will come to LA and bash his head with a baseball bat, so you better find him within a couple of days, because if I find him first, he's fucking dead. That was sort of one of my communications. I was pissed. Remember how pissed I was?
He was, yeah. there were people holding him back. I mean, we were on a trip when we found out. We were actually up north with a handful of friends visiting the woods in Georgia, and got the call. And yeah, he was ready to get on a plane, and people had to talk him down, and it was...
Tables and chairs were flying.
Yeah.
The baby was fine. There was some bleeding. I went to the hospital that night, and I had to keep it on like rest, kind of on bed rest for a while, but within like 2 months or so, the baby was completely fine. Yeah. Throughout the whole relationship with the guy Romero, like I said, it was really rocky, and I was dramatic, and when you start acting dumb outside of a bar, calling each other names, and then guys are fighting guys, it's just dumb. And I was pretty dramatic. So there's times where my friends would be like, you need to knock it off. Like, you're, provoking him to be crazy because of his drinking problem, and he's going to react crazy. Or vice versa. He finally started to get, I think, shit. And that's why I felt when this happened, right? And Chelsea ran, and Mike, I was like, thank the Lord, they finally see that I'm not lying. This guy is crazy sometimes. And they did. They were like, I was in complete shock. I could barely talk to them. I was crying, hyperventilating, shaking, trembling. And it was like a terror moment. Like I thought he was around the corner at any moment and I was going to be killed. And it was like that for many weeks after. I had nightmares like all the time. But that night, they told me time and time again through comforting me and telling me sorry they weren't there the time before when he could have done this then, when they were basically saying that this time Romero knows he messed up, and we all know he can't get away with this one, and we know you're right this time.
So after that, I made several phone calls to Romero's brother and to the OSA at West US. I made calls to a few other people. I was trying to track him down. OSA's big thing was, well, we're hands off. It didn't happen at the organization. He's a Scientologist, but we're going to handle this matter outside of Scientology as a marital dispute. And I'm like, yeah, fuck you. I knew he was of no service to me. So I got rid of him right away.
Chelsea and Mike King had to be called by the district attorney, prosecutor and investigator to build their case on him. Like I said, they don't drop these cases. And the police couldn't find him, so they had placed warrants out for his arrest for the charges he was being charged with. And it took a long time for him to be arrested.
So I knew that the ethics terminal, wherever he was going, knew him and might know where he was. So that chick got a call too. I chewed her ass. And I said, if you know where he's at, you need to get him turned in. So I just kept pounding the phones and trying to get someone to call the police, because we had heard that he'd gone to Mexico. And they were thinking about extraditing him. But I actually found out that he was in LA hiding somewhere, but he was working at some company. So I got the chick to write up a PTS declare on him, a potential trouble source declare, criminal type B, and got him fired from his job. And then he further went into hiding, and then he finally his brother got a hold of him, and he turned himself in, or he was turned into the Los Angeles police and incarcerated.
He was first given a public defender to represent him, and that made sense to me. I mean, he didn't have money, and his entire family were Sea Org members. So I knew they didn't make more than $30 a week, 40 max.
I was relaying the information, and she was helping me with decision making, because I really probably wasn't making the best decisions. And we were working and building a case, and OSA West US had kind of come back on the line, because now, we're building a case outside of Scientology, even though they said it happened outside of Scientology. And I said, yeah, this motherfucker needs to be in jail or dead. So I'm going forward with a court case. Sue me. Put it in my ethics folder. I do not care. I'm coming to LA. We're going to have a court case.
And so in Scientology, things aren't handled through the criminal justice system. They're handled internally. It's supposed to be that way, like to keep it out of the court system. You know, there's always a solvent or a way to solve things peacefully in the church. And I grew up like that, believing that, right? But this was a point where I felt threatened, like my life was in danger, and I saw a person who was not sane, not thinking right. There was vengeance there in that moment, evil intention, right? And I didn't know what to do. I'm pregnant, and it was a horrible, horrible feeling to feel like that rage on you and at you. And I didn't care about the fucking internal system of the church. And I couldn't stop it if I wanted to. This is where I'm trying to explain, like, I got the guilt trips from my friends, from the people I tried to talk to that were Sea Org members, like, for instance, Romero's family. But beyond the family, of course, they're going to feel for him, but writing knowledge reports on the situation from the whatever they're called, director of inspections and reports, and places me and my dad had tried to write reports to, and that weren't really being answered or handled.
They were basically telling me I could do what I needed to do, but, you know, it would all have to then be transpired over into, you know, there would be data and ethics folders. It would be like known that he's a PTS type B. You know, they helped me a little bit with that, but it was more like, let's not make this a big, huge incident type of situation. It was like, let's just handle it in the courts if it needs to be handled in the courts. They were absolutely this. If he did do this, it was really, really, really bad. But at no time did they ever really help me find the guy, write up anything. They didn't ever tell me not to, but it was like they were of no help. They were like almost like a information taker for the church. That was about it.
For the longest time, I was being made to feel it was my responsibility that he was in the position he was in, being, you know, charged with attempted murder of a fetus, of a baby, meaning our baby, and assault with a deadly weapon, you know, from beating me up because I provoked it, or I'm lying, or whatever it was. There was all these things being put on me from my friends who grew up in the church. Chelsea called me and told me that she had heard that I had done a drug past the time, I guess, that I had done all these conditions for her for doing drugs, and me wanting to tell her about that. And it could have been true. I don't even remember at this point, but it was way back then. And because of that, she said that she's not going to talk to the detective anymore, because if I lied about that, I'm lying about this. And she doesn't want to see Romero in a jail, incarcerated with real criminals, with the real bad guys. So that was the first blow to me. It was like, wow, this is the guy, like, that put me through all of this shit, you know? And I cleaned out your fucking closet. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. It was just, she decided, I don't know if it was her way of justifying not to talk to the detective, because I know for a fact there was a lot of pressure. PR stuff, they didn't want this guy to be in the courts or whatever. They wanted the whole case to be dropped. But it was when, you know how court systems go, like there's postponing dates and dates and dates. But we had, you know, the detective would call me and update me on how things are going, or if there was an update, you know. So I was kept aware of these things. And when the first court date, maybe not the first that I was going to be involved with, which was the preliminary hearing where I was to testify what exactly happened.
Right, I came to LA with Larisa. We went to a hotel. We met with the Los Angeles police. We were given the schedule of all the court dates and what was going to happen.
he had hired a new attorney, like hired one, and it was a criminal defense attorney who just happened to work for the Church of Scientology in the past, represented them.
At the court case, who comes along but a hired hitman lawyer for Scientology and some
representing Romero.
bullshit background story that all of a sudden his Sea Org family, strapped for cash, came up to pay for this high-priced lawyer who'd gotten Scientology through some bumps. And I'm thinking, bullshit.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to go into court the first day, and all of these kids, some of these kids that had visited my house in Florida from LA, they're all sitting on Romero's side. And the little fucker's turning around and smirking and making faces and acting like it's no big deal.
I saw all my friends, like the closest ones at least, you know. I mean, I knew they had to be there because they were supposed to be witnesses for the DA, you know, for me. But they were also being called as, impeachment witnesses for the criminal side, like Romero's side, to basically character assassinate me.
Well, he also had his own little glee club there in the audience. I mean, a bunch of Scientology kids showed up to back him.
There was like 60, 80, 100 kids there.
Making Larisa feel bad because she had brought charges against a fellow Scientologist.
Yeah.
Like, never mind what he did. You did the unthinkable. We don't do that, you know? We don't bring charges against a fellow Scientologist.
Yeah. It's myself and the deputy district attorney or her aide, and that side, rows and rows of kids, and the lawyer just chewing up, softball questioning, bullshit little questions to Romero, but just chewing the shit out of Larisa. I mean, just talking to her like she was a street whore. It was disgusting.
There was little eye contact, little speaking. We were kind of told not to do that, both, you know, because of the court situation. Romero's whole family was there. Sonny Moore was there, sitting on Romero's side. Like, I don't get it. And I had to testify what happened, kind of like what I'm doing now. But it was 7 months pregnant, really fresh. These are my best friends. I'm thinking while I'm up there, and here's Romero in an orange jumpsuit, then I'm having to look at him and tell the whole court who he is and pointing him out. It was traumatic. I mean, so I'm having to testify even harder than being sworn under oath in front of this room full of people and like an official. I've only seen this in the movies. Why is this happening? Like, aren't we all Scientologists in here? Like, what the fuck? It was just so weird. And his mom, I would think, you know, like, this is your baby. You might think maybe there's a little sliver of doubt it's not his, but it is, you know, it's been proven, but there was no emotion. Like, I don't know, maybe it was just hard. And in that room was where it was really real. Like, wow, this is betrayal. And it wasn't just these friends, it was by my church. Like, I couldn't believe that it would go that far. It's just to cover up something like, I don't know how to explain it. It was hard.
According to the actual court documents here, the police responded to a battery call on November 7th, 2009. And after a police investigation, a criminal case was filed on December 18th, 2009, with the charges of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. A warrant was issued for Romero's arrest, and he was taken into custody on or around January 5th, 2010. The next day, he first appeared in court and was assigned a public defender. However, by his next court appearance on January 19th, 2010, he was represented by Donald Wagger, the private attorney who the DeWalls believe was hired by the Church of Scientology, even though the legal officer at OSA said he wasn't. Don Wagger is not a Scientologist, but had done work for Scientology in the past. On March 23rd and 24th, Larisa testified. While the court was full of people there to show support for Ramiro, only 2 of Larisa's former friends were witnesses for the defense, Larisa Mintz and Candace Boyson. Chelsea Hall testified on Larisa's side. Larisa was not in the courtroom for that testimony, but according to what she was later told, Chelsea downplayed her testimony to make it sound like Larisa was the one who was trying to make a scene. Once all the testimony and evidence was heard, the court determined that the attempted murder charge would be dropped, but the assault with a deadly weapon charge stayed, and the case was going to move to trial. Ramiro's bail was dropped significantly, and it looks like he was released from custody at this point, having spent 2.5 months in jail. However, the case was still scheduled to stand trial. Over the next few months, Ramiro's lawyer attempted to get the charges lessened or dismissed, but was unsuccessful, and a jury trial was finally set for September 23rd. Once it was clear that a trial was happening, Ramiro then pled nolo contendere to the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, and the court found him guilty. Nolo contendere is a plea by which a defendant in a criminal prosecution accepts conviction as though a guilty plea had been entered, but does not admit guilt. He was sentenced to 1. 5 years probation, 2. Complete a year-long domestic violence class, 3. Serve 180 days in LA jail. He was given total credit for this by the time he served, even though he was only in jail for about 90 days. 4. A fine totaling $630. 5. A court protective order was issued for Ramiro to stay at least 100 yards away from Larisa and only contact her via email or phone for child support purposes. Larisa got the news just before leaving to return to Clearwater and was finally able to move on with her life. It took 2.5 more years, a positive paternity test, and a court order for Ramiro to start paying child support, but he finally did do so. He has never expressed any desire to meet or see his daughter. As for Larisa, the less that Scientology has had to do with her, the better her life has gotten.
She was perfectly healthy, 8 pounds, 10 ounces, huge and healthy. And Sylvia was my birth coach. And my mom came down from Texas. She was living in Texas at the time. So I had all my parents there to support me, with Shyla, that's my daughter. And as far as the church, the only influence or whatever I had was through my aunt, who was still in Clearwater. But I quickly moved in with my mom after my daughter was born, who lived in Texas, because she wasn't working, and she offered me to live with her. I can go to school and get my degree, and she'd watch Shyla in the day like a nanny. So I wouldn't have to work to pay my rent, to hopefully go to school one day and watch my baby and pay for daycare. So it was just a good workout. So my mom's been out of the church for years at this point, so it was easier to get away. And then once I'm in school, it was just, wow, a whole new world, you know, like there's so much more out here, you know. What? That the Scientology world just shrunk really quick. It was like a whole body of loopholes and pockets of all kinds of cool stuff. Yeah, I graduated. I got my associates in general studies degree, and I graduated walk of stage, and then I started taking more coursework to work towards a bachelor, but I just haven't found what I want to do that in yet. I stayed with my mom in her house for about a year and a half, finished school, and then I got set up in a program for single moms who are going to school, similar situations to mine, whether it's coming from an abusive situation or they also help like foster kids and stuff like that. But they give you housing as long as you're going to school. And that's what I did. I was working towards a nursing degree outside of my associates in general studies. And I stayed there for about almost 2 years, and then I met my partner now, my boyfriend Colt. So we dated, and there's no men allowed at my house. I mean, it was a kind of a program where that was just, you were there for one particular purpose, to finish school, and they're kind of helping women out, and kind of, they just want to make sure you're doing the right thing. But, you know, I had already graduated. There's tons of women that could use that kind of help. And I took the risk and I went with Colt. And we've been together over 3 years, and we have a baby, a new baby. And she's 18 months, or actually 20 months now. Oh my gosh. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm still in Texas and being a mommy, raising a family outside of those kind of, you know, indoctrination craziness. So the whole time I've been in Texas, which is when Shiloh was still a baby, and she's 6 now. So it had been a good 5 years that I had kind of checked out of the Church of Scientology. And there was still confusion and hurt and upset and doubt now completely by my Sea Org stuff, and I kind of like squashed that. And you know, if a friend wrote to me, I'd remember it and be like, oh my God, that was so crazy back then, whatever. And then the Romero thing, it just smushed all that away, and went to school. So I kind of was turned off by it all. And plus, you know, having to take out a big credit card debt with my aunt, who I loved so much, and now there's this thing in the middle, and then on top of that, it's like something I don't want to look at ever again, and now I'm paying it back slowly for working for a company. Ugh, that was just like an org. So I was turned off pretty much. But my parents, when I come visit them, were kind of still in the church. My dad especially, he was just like one of those gung-ho, gonna die a believer, Mr. Church guy. And I always knew that, so it was just a subject. I just went beep. Anyways, so how the news came down was my dad, I believe, called me and said, Sylvia is getting declared. And I'm like, declared an SP? And he's like, yeah, the church is declaring her an SP. I was like, what? It was just like, I didn't understand. I mean, I knew Sylvia had doubts. I knew she had friends that had been declared, that she just didn't see why she had to stop talking to them like they're dead. Like, and it's literally how it's supposed to be. But I knew that she was kind of floozy with it, like trying to be along and play the rules or whatever for her marriage and friends, I'm sure, her family, other family. So I figured, okay, I guess it could have happened. I was waiting for maybe that could happen, but when it actually happens to you, it's like a different, whoa, this is real. And then what comes along with it, you don't expect. It's crazy. So I was convinced that my dad would divorce her. And here I'm going to lose another family, or what am I going to have, another parents now? Or not parents, but all these step parents in my life building up like massively, and more siblings for sure. But no, he didn't do that. He left too. And it was a shock, but a blessing, I guess. It was amazing. And so it was like the best news ever. I could finally be real with him. I could finally say that shit's weird. Or that makes sense, you know, or man, it was a scary time, but it was a good time. Like, it was relief in the long run, I guess. Safety now.
I asked Larisa and her parents for any final thoughts about all of their experiences and how their life is now that Scientology is no longer any part of it.
The priorities are screwed up as far as parents in the church. That their children are not the priority. Going up the bridge is the priority. More than anything, it's the priority. And everything that comes along with that. You know, I am going to say a name. Cheryl Festa is Kakan. You know, she's got this ethics, whatever it is, protection. And yet, I remember her daughter, Gina, coming to our house and kicking her sneakers off. Her feet smelled. The girl hadn't bathed. You know, I've been to Cheryl's house and you could barely get the front door open and it smelled. The woman doesn't clean. I mean, it was, yet she's Cheryl Festa, you know? And that kind of stuff is crazy to me. You know, I would joke about parents having to tie on their cape and save the world while their children suffer. And we are guilty, absolutely, of that to a certain extent, you know, and it was funny. It was the boys, my sons, who, because I was like the volunteer queen. Anything that came up, I wanted to volunteer for it. And my boys, I think they were both 15 years old, said, no, we're not going to help you this time. We're not doing it. And you need to quit. You need to quit. Quit volunteering. And it was funny. They sat me down and just knocked sense into me, you know, quit volunteering. I slowed down to a certain extent. I did. But I listened to them. I kept volunteering. But to me, that was the priority thing. The parents just are clueless as to the importance of their job as a parent. You know, they think, oh, the kid's 18, I'm done. Bullshit. You know, if your kid has not fulfilled their dream of whatever it was that they wanted to be as a kid, your job's not done. You know, it's just not. And I'd like to for both of us to realize we have 3 kids that are fulfilling dreams. You know, they're not just working for us. You know, they're not joining the Sea Org because they really don't know what else to do with their life. You know, I mean, they're actually out there. We got a rock star. We got a kid at USF. We got Larisa, who's got 2 years of college under her belt and raising 2 beautiful daughters and going off on this photography hobby thing of hers, which is wonderful. They're happy, you know, members of society. And that's important. Not these kids that just lose sight of whatever dream they had because it was poo-pooed. It's unimportant. What's important is to become an auditor, to become a Scientologist, join the Sea Org, you know, or make money. That's the other thing. A lot of kids are money-driven, not vocation, but money, so that they can flow it to the bridge or help expand Scientology somehow. Well, that's all I got to say about that. Your turn.
Well, first off, I would never raise my kids in Scientology or under Scientology tenets again. I just wouldn't, because though our kids turned out pretty well, I think there was enough of Sylvia and I left where we didn't fully and 100% agree with how the church told us to raise our kids, that we have some pretty awesome kids. But I saw example after example after example after I left staff and when I was on staff of how kids were treated. They're like little mini workhorses. Get them putting out promo. Have them work in central files. Have them stamp things. Put those kids to work. But it was all about building up the organization. You know, what say did they have when we grabbed them by the hand and said, let's go protest something in front of the police station? Were they going to say no? We heard about that letter. We heard about that. You took us to the protest when we were 8 years old. What the hell was wrong with you?
Yeah, what was wrong with us?
Right? I was handling kids that had been being assigned conditions. Like over and over and over. Something that I did to my own kids that I finally stopped doing because they would have a weekly condition that they would have to do for their job. And they would start crying and flipping out in front of me because it reminded them of how and what their parents did to them. But basically, in a nutshell, it's not an area that's going to make a kid do better. I really think they're a second-class citizen, and it's disgusting. And there's no way that my granddaughters will ever crack a Dianetics or Scientology book if I have a say-so.
It feels like liberating. It's like a lot of dark things you have to work through that I have to, but there's like hope. No, there's so much more to learn, so much more that I haven't learned, that I should have learned, that I'm excited now to learn. It's like the world's open, and it's out of my life, and I don't have to worry about my daughter ever wanting to join the Sea Org or the craziness. It's just, I don't have to have that, and I never want that for anyone else. So it's just been, it's exciting. It's still fresh, like, because I grew up in it, you know, and I'm finally a big kid. I'm an adult now. I have my own kids. So that's how I look at it. It's just, I want it out of there.
Moving on from Scientology is not just a matter of getting rid of the books and lectures or not taking calls from the church anymore. It can be likened to living in a foreign country where people act and talk differently, and the whole way of life is not really the same as it is here. Moving to this country, it would take months or even years to acclimate and flush out the old habits and thought patterns of your original country. That's what it's like getting out of the culture of Scientology. Some former members make the change quickly, while others take a while, and a few are never able to really adjust. I hope this series has helped shed some light on what that struggle is like and why Scientology is considered a destructive cult that does so much more than just take some of your money or your time away from you. The good news is that getting away is possible. And from the point of view of most ex-members, getting out was the best thing that ever happened to them. Thank you for watching.